Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Karen. My business name is Nurture Parenting and I believe in teaching babies and children to sleep in a kind way. It is a conscious parenting model and authoritative parenting. So I'm right in the middle of the paradigms. And I'm going to go into today why I practice in this way and why I don't do control crying, why I don't believe in control crying, and why I think control crying is wrong on so many levels. Now, this is going to be a bit of a deep and meaningful video, and I'm going to go right back into my professional life as well as my personal life. So it's something that I've probably been waiting a long time to do, but I haven't felt ready to do it till this week, till today. It's interesting when you decide to move countries, which is what I'm doing at the moment. So I'm from the UK originally, from the north of England, and I came to Australia 21 years ago. And so I've been working as a midwife and a nurse and a child and family health nurse and baby whisperer ever since I arrived in Australia in January 2002. I've been a midwife for over 34 years, trained in the UK, in the north of England, in Leeds and Manchester, etc. My family home is from further north, it's from the Lake District, which is where I'm going back to very soon. So let me get into the nitty gritty. So when I became a midwife, I then decided I was going to do a degree in psychology. I just had this feeling that I needed to do this, and so that's what I did. So at the age of 24, I took myself off to university. In those days, I was doing it at night school as well as working as a midwife, and spent 5 years doing this degree in psychology. At the time when I was doing my degree in psychology, and you cover the child development bit, and I had an epiphany. It was not awfully good, but it was an epiphany. It's interesting how, and I'm a very spiritual person, I'll just put it out there, I'm quite woo-woo. For those of you that are wondering, I'm also a Reiki master as well, I do energy healing. But I have an epiphany. And in the child development module we're doing, we're talking about attachment, an attachment to the mother. And what happens when that attachment is broken, when it's fractured. And I suddenly thought, oh my God, I think this was me. I think something happened to me when I was very little. And I thought about it for a while. I didn't talk about it in the class because I didn't really want to bare my soul, so to speak. This was the days before social media, before people really bared their soul. I thought, I'll just keep that to myself. I don't think I'm ready to share this or want to share this. Because I thought, I've sort of sorted myself out and I'm pretty together. So I don't need to pull myself apart to psychoanalyse myself. And I think my mum did a really good job at bringing me up. I thought, we'll just leave it where it is, you know, let sleeping dogs lie, so to speak. So then I became a health visitor and I did a lot of child protection work. And so I've seen what happens to abandonment or a fracturing of the attachment between a mum and a child. And I've seen children that have really shut down, which has been very, very confronting. And I'm just glad that I was able to protect those children. And unfortunately, some of those children got removed and put into care, which probably was the safest place for them at that moment in time. But my whole life's work has been to do with babies, children, and that bond between the mum and the infant. So then I set up Nurture Parenting about 12 years ago now, after I got really sick of the health service in Australia and thought, do you know what? This health service, it's not doing a great job at helping support families in the early weeks, the early months. I had to get annoyed with it to leave it. So then I sort of had this this knowledge that maybe things that happened to me in my early childhood were not sort of great. And I think it was when I started getting into sleep work, and people just assume you do control crying because they don't know there's any other way. And I started to examine all this stuff and what self-regulation means and what happens when we get it wrong. And then I went and asked my mum, because I said, Mum, I know something happened to me when I was 2.5, and let me get into it now. So when I was 2.5, I was in hospital in isolation in the north of England, in a hospital in Lancaster. And in those days, it was the late 1960s. Things in the health service, things in nursing were not great. We didn't understand this attachment between mum and child. And in the country where I'm from, because I'm from a little village in a country background, my mum gave birth to us at home. I was a home birth, so was my brother. My sister was a hospital birth because she decided to be a bit awkward and wouldn't come out. So that's a whole other story. So my mum was pregnant, heavily pregnant with my brother. And because I was infectious, also they thought my mum wasn't allowed to come and see me. So my granddad, my maternal granddad, maternal grandma, my dad, my uncles, they all came to see me. Now the nurses had removed all my toys from me. There was nothing in my room. There was just a bare cot and a side table. And I can still remember that room right now. I can actually put myself right back into it. And I remember being left to cry by the nurses alone for 2 whole weeks. I was 2.5 years old and I was left to cry for 2 whole weeks. Nobody comforted me. Nobody came to see if I was okay. And so when I left the hospital, sorry if I feel emotional because it's just, this is like a really big story. I'm sure you understand. I don't often get emotional, but this is why I do the job I do. So when I left the hospital a very damaged child. So bear in mind, my mum's got a new baby and it was a boy, and boys are very sensitive little things, and she had me damaged. And I'm going to tell you what I mean by damaged. So I was rocking like a child out of an orphanage. So I was doing like what the kids do in the Eastern European orphanages. I was rocking and making a self-soothing noise because nobody had been to soothe me. I'd had to learn to calm myself. So then a little while ago, I decided that I'd better ask my mum about this, because I thought I can't have my mum die and me not know about myself. I need to know about myself. Considering the job that I do, I need to know the nitty-gritty of all this. So like I said, she did a really good job and put me together, and I lived quite a normal childhood after this event. So I said to my mum on the phone, must have been about maybe a year or 2 ago, I said, remember me when I was 2.5 and I was in hospital in isolation and the nurses left me to cry alone? She said, yes. My mum doesn't get emotional. She started to cry. And I was like, oh my goodness. I have gone to the place that she's sort of like covered over because it was so horrific and so traumatic. And imagine you're a first-time mum and you put your most precious possession, your firstborn child, into the care of a hospital, and this is what the hospital does. And I said to her, what happened to me? How did you get me right again? And how long did it take you to get me right again? This is the big one. So she said, it took me 6 months to get you right again, Karen. 6 months. She goes, it was just awful. And she cried on the phone. I was just shocked beyond belief that 2 weeks of being left to cry alone could do 6 months of damage. I was like, so what are we doing when we're doing control crying and leaving children to cry? Are we doing harm? I think there is a better way of doing sleep training, And I think the better way is co-regulation. He's been in the room with them, supporting them, holding space, not doing it for them, but being. Yes, you can do cuddles, but they're short cuddles, but you are there to support them. And that's why I really believe in doing a presence method with sleep training. Because yes, we need to let children manage their emotions and self-regulate, and to do that, you've got to let these emotions out. And it can be quite raw and quite challenging, I know, but that's why I believe in practicing in this way. Because if you think, every time I'm doing sleep training, I'm putting myself back into that 2.5-year-old body. And the type of attachment you have in the first 3 years of life plays out for the rest of your life, no matter how good things are before or afterwards. That period of trauma will damage a child. And mine had absolutely damaged me. And I'm going to show you a book that I've written about it in a moment. But when you have been let down by somebody, when you've been left to cry alone, then when you're let down in the future by an adult, unfortunately for my other half, I feel sorry for him, because if he lets me down, and he does occasionally because nobody's perfect, I fall into that 2.5-year-old child's body. And I start saying things like, I don't need anybody, I can do this myself. And I become fiercely independent. And I'm aware, in retrospect, that that is the damage that was done to me at 2.5, that I fall back into that, no matter how good my mum was before or afterwards, is what happened at that moment in time. And that's how long it takes to do harm, is just 2 weeks. I've been left to cry alone. So when people do controlled crying, where they pull the door and walk away, that is really bad, like really bad, okay? When people do like a check-in method and an in and out method, potentially it might be okay, but I think there's a better way. I know the research says that controlled crying is okay. I would beg to differ on that one. So having lived it, I just felt it's something that, I feel ready to share it now that I'm leaving Australia and moving to England. I just felt this was like a watershed moment in my life, and I felt it had to come out, it had to be said, because who better to say it than the person that looks at this stuff day in, day out, that writes about this stuff day in, day out, and has worked with it both professionally and personally. So if you want to know more about attachment types and where you fit, where your baby fits, this is a book I've written. It's called Help, I Have a Baby with Separation Anxiety and I Don't Know What to Do. I'd almost forgotten what the title was for a moment. I've written 9 parenting books. This is just one of them. But this goes through the 4 different types of attachment and what it looks like, and then what it looks like as an adult as well. So when I wrote this book, that was like a bit of a profound moment, and I was aware that I was probably going to do this video in the future. I didn't know when I was going to do it, but I just decided this week, I think I feel ready to do this. I feel ready to bare my soul. And it is, hard to let yourself be vulnerable, to let people know about the nitty-gritty of your life. But I feel nowadays we're pretty good at sharing, so it's time for me to share. So I hope that this video has helped people. I hope it's made you think about, your choices when it comes to parenting and sleep training. But just know that you can sleep train and do it in a kind way and not do harm. And I think that's really important to take away from that. So I think on that note, I think I will say goodbye. I'll probably do a few more deep and meaningful videos in the future, because I'm going to have a bit more time when I'm in the north of England. Because over here, I literally am flat chat, busy working, and I don't have time for a lot of these very long videos. But maybe I should do some more of them. So thank you for listening, and I'm glad now I've shared my story.